G'day there ladies and gents of the internet, I am the Braveheart Aussie and welcome to a journey in world building. This is the second of our two-part mini-series on the tidally locked world of Ruscon in our Dark Diaspora world building project. Last time we explored some of the key facts and technical attributes of the world. This time we're going to dive deep into the details of the economy and society of Ruscon, from its early post-scattering challenges to governance and economy, business, trade and interstellar relationships. At the time of the Dark Diaspora, Ruscon is home to approximately 900,000 people. This is comparatively low for a planet that was settled during the Wave 1 scattering, but reflects the constraints and impacts that the tidally locked nature of the world has on the overall settlement capacity of the planet. Ruscon was one of the few planets able to be settled during the Wave 1 scattering, with two separate pod colonizations making landfall as part of the first round of launches post the discovery of the malady and the introduction of the fog. These early settlers and subsequent landings were, however, plagued by the attacks from occupants of previous failed pod launches, with 30+ malady-plagued colonist groups running rampage across the surface for almost 4 decades, threatening subsequent settlers before themselves succumbing to the dangers of the planet. Early pods and subsequent settlers were dominated by ethnic Russian groups. As one of the combatant nations within the War of Cataclysm, ethnic Russians numbered less than 10 million before the Madagascar impact. By the time of the United Redevelopment Authority and the beginnings of scattering waves 1 and 2, the number of ethnic Russians had dropped below 50,000. This resulted in an early attempt on Ruscon by the URA, as well as several other planets, to introduce ethnic streaming-based colonization and settlement programs, and Ruscon was specifically selected to be home to ethnic Russian survivors of the impact. It was at this time that the planet was renamed Ruscon, after the Rus people of Russia. Despite this and the inclusion of Ruscon in the Primer Codex, the list of 500+ most likely settlement destinations for humanity targeted during the early scattering, Ruscon proved extremely challenging. The Terminator region around the midpoint between the day and night sides of the planet is characterized by a marshy swamp wetlands, as well as jagged rocky mountains and other less than suitable terrain to support traditional urban-style cities. Instead, subsequent settlers built upon the original approach adopted by early colonization pods, which resulted in the construction of large megastructure-like tower cities called Metropols, which are now dotted around the Terminator. At the time of the Dark Diaspora, there are approximately 100 of these Metropols, most averaging around 10,000 residents. Nova Moscovia, which is the capital of the planet, is the largest, at 1.2 miles in height and being home to almost 100,000 people, both within and surrounding the Metropol structure. These city constructs are shaped like a ship's sail, similar to the design of the Sydney Opera House, albeit in some cases thousands of feet high. These shapes act as both a heat exchange framework between the light and the dark sides, as well as wind traps. Supplemented by standalone wind turbines and energy exchange generators, the Ruscon maintain a very high level of energy production per capita compared to many of the worlds in the Dark Diaspora. While this is typically a leading indicator of a high socio-economic standard on the planet, i.e. energy production, the socio-economic conditions on the planet of Ruscon is only 0.69, or approximately 30% lower than that of Lost Earth at the early 21st century. This is primarily due to the fact that the planet has adopted a pseudo-feudalistic, oligarchic, mercantile style of economy with a focus on production of food and agricultural products, as well as select manufactured goods. A rice analog grain crop is the most common produced on the planet, given the predominance of the swampy marshlands in the Terminator. Algae-based protein products, known colloquially as green bars, are also produced in large quantities, being sourced from refined algae from the mega-algae herds that roam the Terminator swamplands. They are one of two main forms of protein available to impoverished and other settlements lacking subsistence across the Dark Diaspora, with the other being the artificial protein strips. This focus on agricultural production is complemented by some terrestrial and orbital large-scale foundry-based manufacturing, with the Ruscon Orbital Works regarded as one of the largest producers of settlement and planetary habitat modules in the diaspora. While these settlement modules are typically of a lower quality than that of others that have been produced in the past across the diaspora, they have a number of specific benefits. Firstly, they've taken over much of the market share vacated by the Moon of Khoton after the attacks by the Galador hegemony. Additionally, the modules are typically cheaper than those produced on Khoton or in Lost Serion, and are also closer and therefore less expensive to be delivered in areas of the Inner Halo in the south and southeast of Lost Earth. These factors appeal to budget-conscious clienteles, including small private settlements, mining operations, and other outposts where residential comforts are not necessarily the priority. This more simplistic approach to habitat module construction, however, also benefits the settlements by removing superfluous luxury elements that are difficult to maintain, particularly in situ, or without major parts being available. The planet has developed effective high-capacity rechargeable energy units capable of being recharged from a diverse variety of power sources across the diaspora. Used extensively across a number of worlds, including being incorporated into other technologies produced in places like Saha. The units tend to not necessarily have a long life, but again are inexpensive and readily available as a bulk consumption item for settlements and outposts. The rare earth mineral requirements for the energy units are sourced typically from a series of night-side open-cut megamines which are partially lit through orbital reflective mirrors installed to thaw the permafrost and allow access to the surface minerals. Mining activity is semi-automated in nature, though manned roles are filled by local and off-world prisoners, slaves, and generally other less fortunate individuals. Death rates in the mines are extremely high, and the return of a person to the metropoles from the mines is almost unheard of. The metropoles principally represent energy and manufacturing centers, each with their own orbital launch platforms, water purification plants, foundries, and mineral processing operations. Each metropole also tends to an incredibly large area of semi-managed farmland for the production of the rice analog crops, as well as local major natural and artificial food production centers. Commercial zones in the metropoles are typically located in the ground levels, above the transport garages and aircraft hangars, and for larger populations have actually spilled out to form something of a shantytown-like bazaar around the base of the metropole. These areas have also come to include slums, where economically disengaged, unemployed, or injured or disabled people are forced to live in horrific conditions. These areas lack even a modicum of services available to the residents in the metropole proper. However, life within the metropoles is only marginally better than that of the slums. The lack of a clear day-night cycle has led to an increase in the amount of hours worked in traditional Lost Earth 24-hour cycle from 8 to 16. This, coupled with lax safety standards and poor work conditions and pay, mean industrial accidents, injuries, and deaths are common and are the most likely reason for a worker and their family to be sent down, meaning to be evicted from their company-allocated residence in the metropole and sent to the slums or out into the wilds. The residences in the towers are haphazardly located with little planning, and in any spare space that can be found is often taken up by a residential module. Resembling smaller scaled-down versions of the habitat modules used for export, these residences provide some personal security, environmental and temperature controls, and living amenities. However, the quality of the residence depends greatly on its location within the metropole. Some are positioned near industrial plants and fabrication units, subjecting the residents to constant heat, noise, and vibration difficulties. In overcrowded metropoles, some residences are even connected to the exterior walls of the metropole towers, subjecting the units to some of the large cyclonic-like storms that travel from the dark to night sides of the planet on a regular basis. More dedicated, purpose-built residential levels are located at the top of the metropoles as penthouses and are home to senior managers, company officials, and junior relatives of some of the oligarch families. Senior members of the families typically live off-world, principally on planets of Saha, but also in Ozovan in the Fringe World Alliance, or in private orbital residences. Religious beliefs on the planet are almost exclusively linked to the Tarvan Covenant, which maintains a strong presence throughout the metropoles, particularly Nova Moscovia and the other major regional centers. The Covenant has adopted a range of presentation and dogmatic elements from the previous Orthodox Christian churches of Lost Earth, with deacons on Ruscon metropoles taking on the title of Patriarch, while the Nova Moscovia Patriarch takes on the additional title of Primate of the Holy Synod of the Covenant. There is a strong focus in the religious practice of the Covenant on Ruscon on conservative interpretations of the Covenant's inherent sin doctrine, and enforcement through communal exile and collective social punishment is common. This has led to high levels of discrimination on the basis of gender, sexual identity, and non-monogamy family structures compared to other parts of the diaspora. However, there is also a reasonably sized presence of the residents' collective devotees across the planet, and most metropoles maintain at least one collective den. Despite attempts by the Covenant representatives to influence local politicians to have the dens outlawed and devotees persecuted, the trade of collective crystals to Ruscon to be inserted into higher energy battery units for export has supported their political protections for the moment. While each metropolitan functions effectively as a company town for their respective oligarch, formally Ruscon is a Federalist representative democracy. Each metropole is represented by an elective local government or council, and functions broadly autonomously from each other, as city-states. All metropoles also have an elected representative who annually meet in the Federal Duma of the peoples of Ruscon. This assembly nominates from its number a leader called the Premier that acts similar to a Prime Minister in the Westminster system and wields representative and executive power, as well as functioning as the head of state. There are no formal political parties, as such concepts are seen as a contributor to the War of Cataclysm and therefore are strictly prohibited. However, a combination of regional, i.e. swamp versus mountain, and religious and social conservatism sees two loose coalitions maintained. The Duma has functioned for much of the past 600 years in its current form with the support of a permanent bureaucracy in Nova Moscovia called the Secretariat. This makes the Secretariat and the Duma some of the longest functioning governance entities in the diaspora, with dating further back than that of the Kingdom of Samyaji. This has resulted in significant pomp and ceremony being associated with Duma proceedings and the appointment of the Premier, including highly religious elements. However, the Duma, along with local councils, are also extremely corrupt and in many cases operate entirely at the behest or in the interests of their relevant oligarchs. Policing within the metropoles varies considerably, though major violent crimes are typically dealt with swiftly. Most crimes are punishable by fines, which when paid typically must include kickbacks to arresting officers and judges. Heinous crimes are typically punished through exile into the swamps, though some people also choose to leave the metropoles and try to establish independent settlements across the world, often seeking to farm the rice or to fish for eels and other life forms that they can use to sustain themselves, either individually or in small family groups. These settlements, when they are successful, however, typically raise the ire of the local metropole and are then destroyed. However, this has forced some exiles to move closer to the day or night sides to take themselves away from the proximity of the metropoles, but at the cost of greater environmental instability and poorer habitability. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we're going to leave today's episode. Hopefully you've really enjoyed this one and the descriptions and exploration of the Ruscon setting to date. I'm really having a lot of fun with this one. These lack of day-night cycle concept, along with these sort of metropole megastructure cities and sort of surrounding swamplands. It's a really interesting sort of concept, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it as well. If you are, make sure you leave a comment in the section below in this video, and also make sure you go and check out the lore videos. I've already released one of the lore videos episodes for Ruscon so far, and we'll have another one coming out after this episode. Next time, we're going to be talking about the terrors on the planet, and they're going to be varied between some of the environmental factors, but very much going to focus heavily on the psychological elements associated with the day and night sides of the planet and the lack of a day-night cycle, and what that means in terms of 600 years of a lack of a circadian rhythm for people on the planet. But that is it for today. Thank you so much. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and may the journey continue.